Welcome to the dark and eerie depths of horror. Prepare to be chilled to the bone as we embark on a journey into the realm of the unknown. Tonight, we unveil 10 tales of terror that will send shivers down your spine and make you question what lurks in the shadows. So, gather around, say hello to Creepy Man, but beware, for once you enter, there's no turning back. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell right now, or be ready to face the creepy man in your dreams. My wife, Cheryl, and I have been together for 10 years, and we got married 2 years ago. We just got a house together not even a month ago, and things couldn't have started on a worse note. We moved to a small inland town of Georgia called Waycross. That's all the details I'm giving, though, to avoid any more possible issues. We're on a quiet street with a big property that sits in front of a medium-sized patch of woods, which was one of the factors that really appealed to my wife and me. We plan to adopt a dog and raise kids here, so we wanted a big property for the dog and kids to play around them on. We both work similar shifts. I get home around 5, and she gets home around 6. Most of the time, the first 2 nights in the house went completely normal. It was the weekend, so we spent our entire days unpacking. It wasn't until Monday night when we were both in bed, only having turned the lights out maybe 20 minutes ago, that outside from the backyard, there was the sound of this blasting music. Our nearest neighbors on either side were spaced out enough where we couldn't mistake music from their yards being in our yard. It was definitely in our backyard, and it wasn't party music or anything like that. It sounded like very old, staticky vintage music. The windows were shut, so after my wife and I exchanged horrified glances at each other and wondered where the music could be coming from, I opened my window on my side of the bed, and it was much clearer. There was some song that sounded like it was from the 1940s or something blasting. I later found out after looking up the lyrics that the song name was Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf by Henry Hall. It has a slight eerie vibe to it for some reason, even though it was meant to be a happy song. But at the time of listening to it coming from our backyard, it was nothing but downright horrifying. We were still learning the house, but we figured there must be a backyard light switch downstairs. I ran downstairs to the back door and flicked the light switches next to the door, and one of them turned on the backyard lights. I didn't see anyone in the backyard. I opened the door, and the music was louder, obviously. But as I walked out into the grass, I realized it wasn't coming from the backyard, rather from the woods. The song played to completion as I was outside in the yard just standing there, looking around. When the song ended, there was silence again. It seemed like someone must have been playing some stupid housewarming prank, but it wasn't appreciated. I went back to my wife and told her it was probably just some kids trying to scare the new ones in town for whatever reason. Hearing myself even say that, I realized how stupid and weird it sounded. Why would anyone do that? The next night, it happened again. A few minutes after we turned out the lights in the bedroom, music from outside started blasting, this time much louder, and the song playing was that song everyone's heard, Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Cheryl and I once again looked at each other, this time in genuine disgust and worry because we had hoped it was just going to be a one-time thing, but it was happening again. I looked out the window, and this time I could see something on the grass. It wasn't a person, but there was definitely something out there. I told my wife I was going to check it out. She said we should just call the cops. And I said, yeah, we will in a second. I went out there with this mindset that I need to establish I'm the man of the house, not just to my wife, but to whoever was thinking they could mess with us just for being the new people on the block. When I was in the yard, I saw the object in the grass was smaller than I had thought, but the blaring creepy song was coming from it. I realized it was an old radio. I turned it off and looked up at the window at my wife, who's watching, and I held it up yelling that someone left it there to scare us with the music. What she did next was not something I expected. In response to that, she started screaming my name to run inside. She kept screaming, "Run!" I yelled, "Why?" And she screamed back, "There's people standing behind you." This statement made my heart skip a beat, and I turned around to face the woods. I saw 3 figures standing like 6 feet apart from each other, clearly facing my direction. They weren't running at me. They were just standing there. I yelled, "Oh shit," and ran back inside the house, slamming the door behind me. My wife was upstairs, hysterically crying already. I told her I'd call the cops, and I did. They arrived, thankfully not that long after. All the while, we were scared to hear knocks at one of the doors or windows. My wife and I desperately explained the situation to both of the police that arrived, and I showed them the radio on the ground. I asked them if they could take it back with them as evidence for prints and told them I only touched the top part with the handle. They did take the radio. They also checked the front of the woods with their flashlights for a few minutes, probably just as a deterrent to the people in the woods to stop their behavior if they were still there. When the police left, honestly, we went right back to feeling vulnerable and scared, but thank Chris, the people never returned. This was only a few weeks ago though. God forbid they came back. I try to get it on video. I was driving home from work one night, taking my usual route home. I got out at midnight, so it was probably 12 a.m. at this point. My town is pretty quiet and boring. A lot of woods everywhere and not a lot of people or houses. I was on this road not far from my house with a cornfield on one side and a patch of woods on the other. It was midsummer, so I had my convertible top down. I was cruising down the street going like 50 when I heard a loud, blood-curdling woman's scream come from one side of the road, but I couldn't tell which one. I brought the car to a quick halt by slamming on the brakes and listening. There was a woman's cry from the left side, in the woods. She was crying for help. I got out of my car and grabbed the baton from my back seat. I walked towards the woods and called back, "Who's out there?" And the woman immediately called back, "Please help me." I began to run into the woods, swiping all the twigs and bushes out of my way. I yelled out to the woman to keep screaming so I could find her. She'd every 10 seconds or so scream, "Help," and I'd approach in that direction, running, screaming back. But pretty soon I started to realize no matter how far into the woods I went, the woman's yells didn't seem to get any closer or louder. If anything, they were always the same distance, even though I was booking it straight in the direction of the screams. I screamed out, "Tell me where you are." And about 5 seconds later, the woman once again screamed out, "Help." I stopped in my tracks. Now, I didn't like this. I started to feel like I was walking into some kind of trap. I turned around and started running back in the direction I came. I ran and ran until I could see the flashing headlight of my car on the side of the road beyond the trees. The whole way back, I still heard the woman's screams, but they were still the same distance, no matter how much closer to my car I got, as if she were following me back. Was I being stalked? I got in my car and just drove out of there, completely freaked out. I wasn't sticking around there though. I was tired. After telling a few friends and family about the strange encounter, I was ready to move on with my life. But a week later, I saw something on the news that made me sick to my stomach. The dead body of a 30-year-old woman was found in the woods by a man hiking with his dog. Oddly, there were no signs of foul play. The location that the body was reported to have been found was the same general area where I heard the screams. While that patch of woods is very big, I can't help but feel that would be a huge coincidence. Back before my girlfriend Jenny and I officially started dating, we would still hang out all the time. We both snowboard, and her family has a little cabin-type house in Vermont, not far from Stone Mountain Resort. This was around our maybe 10th time hanging out. She invited me to go up there for a weekend with her to go snowboarding for the first time together. It was like a 5-hour drive. As we neared her little house, we spent about half an hour on this very windy, secluded road on which we'd pass occasional driveways that would lead up into properties blocked off by walls of trees. We were way up there in the mountains. The sight of other cars by this point was something to behold. It really felt like we were alone up there. A lot of the driveways didn't even have tire marks in the snow, meaning even a lot of the houses were void of people. Jenny told me that's because a lot of the houses here were owned by people out of state, just like her situation. I was going like 30 when she yelled at me to slow down. It's coming up, so I hit the brakes, and this little opening in the trees that I otherwise would have missed came up. We drove this narrow trail in 4-wheel drive, which led to this small house covered in snow. It looked incredibly cozy. We parked, and the first thing we did was turn the heat on in the little house. We unloaded our stuff inside, and since it was already getting dark that night, we just cooked some of the food we packed for dinner and watched a movie, Pursuit of Happiness, actually. So the house had just about everything: heat, electricity, except running water. Her family had jugs and jugs of water for important things like washing hands and plates and stuff, but there was no working toilet, so she told me we had to use the outhouse outside. I only had to go pee that night, so I just went out to the front deck and peed into the snow. It was also snowing out that night. We fell asleep at some point during the second movie we watched, and we woke up pretty early to our phone alarms. We wanted the freshies on the mountain. We started getting ready to drive up to the ski resort. After breakfast, I had to go out to the house though. I ran out to the house in my shoes, and my feet started to freeze on my way to the house. Though I saw footprints in the snow, they were kind of big, but I couldn't tell if they were boot marks or animal prints. I followed the trail, and it actually wrapped around the house and then went into the woods. I called Jenny outside, and she came to look and said it was probably a black bear since they're everywhere up here. So I went, did my business, and we set off to the ski resort where we had a good 8-hour run. Afterwards, we stopped at a diner to eat and then went back to the house. By this point, it was pitch black outside and snowing again. We set up a fire and got the heat on full blast and started blasting some music. We started to drink, and eventually, I had to break the seal and pee. But also, if I was throwing my boots on anyway, I figured I'd do all my business in the house. I ran out into the snowstorm and the house once more. This time I slammed the door shut to prevent snow and cold air blowing in my face. I heard the blasting music from inside the house still. Then, over that, I heard the crunching sound of footsteps in the snow passing the house. "Jenny!" I yelled. No answer. The footsteps just walked away. I brought my phone with me, so I just texted her, "Are you outside?" It didn't immediately deliver though, because my cell reception sucked up there. A few minutes passed, and I was still in the house. I was just about to finish when the blasting music suddenly stopped. It was just pure silence, minus the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground outside. As soon as I stepped out of the house, I realized it was pitch black out here now. The lights from the house were off. I figured maybe the power went out. I used my phone's flashlight and noticed a fresh pair of footsteps in the snow leading to the house. I followed the footsteps to the front door. They seemed to stop, then continue around the house. I banged on the door and yelled Jenny's name. Suddenly, the door opened, and an arm pulled me inside the house. It was Jenny. She slammed the door shut and unlocked it. She whispered that there was a man who tried to open the door, which she locked as soon as I went to the house because she was scared being alone. When she saw the person at the door wasn't me, she cut the power and hid in a corner in the living room and watched in horror as a stranger walked past the living room window, slowly looking inside. I came to the door only a couple of minutes after this happened. Jenny told me about the secret cellar in the floor that her dad kept a couple of rifles and shotgun in. Navigating in the dark, I found the handle to it and lifted it open. Now, using my flashlight, I climbed down the little ladder and grabbed one of the guns off the wall. We then waited on the couch in the dark, afraid to turn the lights back on, exposing ourselves to whoever was out there. The closest neighbors were not a short walk. Jenny said it wouldn't have been any of them, and odds are they weren't even in Vermont right now. Once again, the only sound was the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground outside until the sickening sound of footsteps in the snow outside returned. I took the loaded gun and marched to the front door, opened it, and shot like 3 rounds into the air, screaming. The footstep sounds were gone. I'd imagine they ran off, and the sound of the shots echoing into the air masked the sound of the footsteps running away. We left the next morning under the recommendation of her father, who said it's best to not be there at the moment. They don't really have anything they're worried about being stolen. So we just got the hell out of there the next day. At least we got our full day of snowboarding in. That horrific night was definitely an experience, to say the least. That was quite the frightful journey through the macabre. We hope you enjoyed these spine-tingling tales as much as we enjoyed sharing them with you. Remember to keep your lights on tonight and check under your bed, for you never know what might be lurking in the darkness. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and never forget to say hello to the creepy man.